So a dealer's license is awesome, but pardon me, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be like meeting you on the street, Ben, and be like, yo, here's some mushrooms. I'm going to deal them to you. Like access is still through medical channels, right? So we've got like Section 56 and we've got the special access program and obviously clinical trials. Can you explain what it means to be a dealer to those channels right now? How does that work? What does it look like?
Great question. Yeah, it's not a drug dealing license, unfortunately. Like I can't just like walk around with mushrooms on the street. As
Right?
much
Too
as I
bad.
want to, we
Yeah.
don't have a license for that. Maybe one day in the future, who knows? I think it's actually an interesting question. We in the industry shouldn't be afraid of pushing for recreational psychedelics.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Psychedelic Spotlight podcast. I am Sasha, and I am here with Benjamin Lightburn from Filament Health. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Sasha.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I have a ton of questions for you. So I'm going to just dive right in and get to the bottom of some stuff. So, Filament Health, you guys produce naturally derived psychedelic medicines. Can you explain a little bit about the difference between something that is naturally derived and something that is synthetic?
Great question. So something that a drug candidate that is naturally derived, what we mean when we say that is that it comes from some kind of a natural source. So the easiest and probably most well-known example would be magic mushrooms, right? Magic mushrooms have many active compounds within them, psilocybin being the most well-known. Psilocybin that we produce actually gets extracted out of magic mushrooms. Just like people probably are familiar with coffee and tea, right? When you drink coffee and tea, you're actually extracting caffeine and other flavor compounds from the coffee bean or from the tea leaf, and you're making, in that case, a liquid extract. Compare and contrast to something that is produced synthetically or artificially. Essentially, what you do in that case is you buy different chemicals from different chemical suppliers and you combine them in certain ways in a lab, which at the end of the day, you end up, it's kind of like you buy different pieces of Lego and you put it together in different reactions and you kind of construct it, like you buy your hydrogens and your carbons and you kind of recreate them in a lab and in a way that eventually ends up with psilocybin. The end result chemical constituent is more or less the same, but the way that you got there is completely different. There's also one other big difference, though. When you make something naturally, you're extracting all of the different interesting compounds that are in the plant. Again, going back to coffee and tea, right? Different species and varieties of coffee and tea have a vastly different taste and a different amount of caffeine. Same thing is true with magic mushrooms, with cannabis, with basically every plant, right? So in the mushroom, you have much more than just psilocybin. And when you make a natural extract, you're going to get all those different compounds, not just the psilocybin. And, people may be familiar with the fact that, or their friends say, that probably people don't actually know anyone that does magic mushrooms, but they probably heard people say, well, this variety makes you yawn and this variety makes you laugh. And if those effects are true, it might be because of different compounds that are sitting in the magic mushroom. In other industries, we talk about something called the entourage effect. We don't really know much about it yet in mushrooms, but the point is, without making a natural extract that contains all of these secondary compounds, we'll never know whether the entourage effect exists or what it does. So that's the thing that's possible to do with our extracts for the first time, because another surprising fact is that up till now, all psychedelic research has actually been done with synthetic substances. So our drug candidates are actually the very first naturally derived drug candidates to enter into clinical trials.
That's fascinating. So you've already answered my second question, which was like, what were the benefits of actually working with a full fruiting body and extracting from it versus something synthetic? And you're talking about all these other compounds that we need to find out about and see, you know, what that entourage effect is essentially.
For sure.
So
There's other benefits too. Like the process of extracting from magic mushrooms is much more environmentally friendly than making something through chemical synthesis. Chemical synthesis involves lots of different really nasty chemicals and produces a lot of waste byproducts and things, which we just don't have with natural extraction.
Right. Okay, that's really good to know. Okay, so then I've heard that you guys have two different ways of administering your product. So there is the oral way, so a capsule, I guess, and then there's something called sublingual, which is under the tongue. Is that like a little tab or?
It is. It's a little tablet, kind of like those little mints that you suck under your tongue. It's like that.
And why do we have two different methods here? And what's the difference?
Great question. So we've, and it's a bit of a longer answer because it goes into our psilocin-based drug candidate.
Okay.
Psilocin is the active form of psilocybin. Not many people know this, but psilocybin is actually inactive in the human body. It needs to convert into another compound called psilocin before it can become bioactive, or meaning like have biological effects in the
right.
Because this conversion is called dephosphorylation happens primarily in the gut. And we think that giving people an already converted form into psilocin makes much more sense for sublingual delivery, because when you deliver something sublingually, it goes right into the bloodstream through the membranes that are found in your mouth, and then can become can go into the brain very, very quickly. Because we were the first to actually develop a stable, standardized oral formulation of psilocin, in addition to our psilocybin drug candidate, we thought it would be also very interesting to look at sublingual delivery for psilocin as well. Delivering a drug by sublingual delivery could potentially have a faster onset time, because you don't have to metabolize it in the gut and then get it into the bloodstream. It can go right into your blood, right from the oral mucosa is what it's called.
Right.
Potentially, it might contribute to fewer side effects, right? You might not have unpleasant gastrointestinal side effects, perhaps. Nausea, perhaps. We'll see. In our very first clinical trial is actually designed to assess whether there are any improvements through the delivery of oral psilocin or sublingual psilocin compared to oral psilocybin. So that's our first clinical trial that's running at University of California, San Francisco.
Nerdy question. So for folks that, you know, do partake in tripping at home or trying mushrooms at home, this thing called chitin, right, which is really hard for our bodies to break down, which kind of makes you feel nauseous. Do you think this sublingual form will actually like avoid all of that?
We do, because in our extraction process, we actually remove most or all of the chitin. We extract the psilocybin, the psilocin, and then we purify it. So the process that we've developed to create these drugs, what it does is it extracts and purifies all the psychoactive alkaloids, which can give us the beneficial effects, but it removes as much as possible of all the other mushroom components, which can potentially have these negative side effects. So we like to think that our product has kind of all the benefits of natural, right? Different compounds, entourage, other beneficial compounds, more environmentally friendly, all that kind of a thing. But hopefully fewer of the downsides, right? Nausea, gut rot, those kinds of things.
This is exciting. Okay, so I was doing some research, and Filament Health is like one of 22 or like a handful of licensed cultivators in Canada. But you're one of the few that actually has a dealer's license as well. Can you explain what the difference is between having like a cultivator's license and a dealer's license?
So the cultivator's license actually pertains more to cannabis. When it comes to psychedelics, they're all controlled substances. And so to make any controlled substances, you require a dealer's license in Canada. So we have a dealer's license because we make of all different kinds of natural psychedelics. We don't make any cannabis products, so we don't have any cultivation. We don't have any cultivation license.
So a dealer's license is awesome, but pardon me, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be like meeting you on the street, Ben, and be like, yo, here's some mushrooms. I'm going to deal them to you. Like access is still through medical channels, right? So we've got like Section 56 and we've got the special access program and obviously clinical trials. Can you explain what it means to be a dealer to those channels right now? How does that work? What does it look like?
Great question. Yeah, it's not a drug dealing license, unfortunately. Like I can't just like walk around with mushrooms on the street.
Right?
As much as I want to, we don't have a license for that. Maybe one day in the future, who knows? I think it's actually an interesting question. We in the industry shouldn't be afraid of pushing for, recreational psychedelics, because there already is a recreational psychedelic market. It's just an illicit market, right?
Massive.
Yeah, exactly. So, Section 56, special access program, clinical trials. They're all quite different. I'll start with Section 56. This was a program basically that the Minister of Health could grant one-off exemptions for people to use psychedelics, psilocybin, outside of the kind of legal framework. And they were very vague, kind of general letters that you would get a one-off basis that would allow you to use psilocybin and not be subject to, prosecution for violating the law. It was a very onerous process. It took months of writing back and forth to bureaucrats in Ottawa, lots of questions, an unknown time waiting period. But for up until January of 2022, it was really the only way for patients in Canada to get legal access to psychedelics. What the Section 56 exemption program did not do was actually provide for you a legal way of actually getting your psilocybin.
Right.
It said that you were allowed to use it and store it and consume it at your house, but you weren't actually allowed to grow it. You weren't actually allowed to buy it, anything like that. So essentially it forced you to go to the black market. Now, obviously, probably most people just grew it at home or whatever it is. But no matter what, the product that you would be receiving was not regulated, right? It's not a quality controlled, standardized product with a known quantity of psilocybin. So we had that program for several years, and beginning last year in January of 2022, Health Canada actually changed some regulations to allow psilocybin and MDMA to be distributed through something called the Special Access Program. The Special Access Program is not unique to psychedelics. It's for all experimental or unapproved drugs. So it's for any patient that is in a serious or life-threatening condition can request access to unapproved drugs. So it might be something that's approved in another country or something that's still in development. But say you're in a very serious condition and you might pass away before this drug gets approved, you can apply to Health Canada to have access to it through your doctor, even though it's not yet an approved drug. And so this was a huge moment when Health Canada allowed people to start applying for psilocybin through this program. The very first SAP authorization for psilocybin happened, I believe, in April. And then since then, there's been basically like a flood of approvals and new applications. We're seeing probably like 60 or 70 patients have been approved to use our psilocybin drug candidate. And it's really a fascinating experience because you get to actually talk to patients and doctors, and if they want, right, and learn about the experience and learn how the drug actually works in the real world. A patient and a doctor needs to apply to Health Canada for approval through the SAP. If the application is complete and well made, like usually Health Canada will approve it like in a week or two. After the approval, if we're the supplier, will get a letter from Health Canada which authorizes us to ship the drug to the doctor, and then the doctor administers it to the patient. So there's actually compared to Section 56 exemption, there's it's a well trodden path.
It's faster.
It's much faster as long as you're within one of the indications that they've already kind of approved. For new indications, it will take them a bit longer to consider. But all in all, in my opinion, it's much quicker and faster and more well supported than the Section 56 exemption program. Clinical trials are a whole nother beast. For a clinical trial, you have a sponsor that submits a protocol to Health Canada. The protocol will involve the use of psilocybin. Health Canada has 30 days to essentially approve or reject the protocol or request comments or things like that. Once that protocol is approved, then a similar letter of authorization is issued to us, giving us permission to ship the study drugs to whatever the clinical site to be dosed according to the protocol. Our drugs have been authorized to enter into probably 10 or 15 Canadian clinical trials at this point. So it's also something that we're very, very familiar with, not just in Canada, but internationally as well.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. That's great. There's a lot of players in the industry right now that are trying to get their poop together in terms of getting GMP certified or recognized by Health Canada as being prepared to meet the onslaught of demand, even just for wellness indications. So my question to you is, why is it so hard to get GMP certified with regards to psilocybin? Is it just dosage related? Is it just understanding the potency and the consistency, or is there more to it?
So GMP compliance is a quite a large undertaking for any organization. It's not just about your facility and your product and like whether your walls are cleanable or anything like that. Those kinds of things that you can see are just the tip of the iceberg. A quality system, it happens much more in the background. It's much more about the paperwork, the team's experience, even like the org chart and what positions you have and the reporting requirements and what's the quality of the water coming into your facility and how often do you test it and having a program for all of those different things. Our team here at Filament, we actually already worked together at a previous company that was manufacturing botanical extracts, which had a full GMP quality system in place. And I think that in large part is what enabled us to get our own GMP compliance together relatively quickly at this in this new facility, in this new industry. Specifically pertaining to psilocybin and natural psilocybin, I would say that achieving consistency, standardization, quality control, stability, all those things are particularly challenging when it comes to magic mushrooms and natural extracts. But again, we had a lot of experience working with similar natural products in other industries. And so we kind of knew what to look for right from the outset. I would say that having a bona fide GMP system and GMP facility is probably even harder or more challenging than having your dealer's license.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you're one of the few that actually does have a GMP certification.
Correct.
So you're leading the charge.
We're doing our best.
Yeah. So then I read on your website that you're actually exploring and expanding your network of potential commercial partnerships. So does this mean, does this sort of work in tandem with being GMP certified? Are you talking about retail here when you say commercial?
Well, actually, in places like Oregon, it could actually be retail. So we've developed a manufacturing process with which we can take raw psychedelic substances like magic mushrooms and turn them into standardized GMP extracts and drug products. We've patented a lot of that technology, which makes it an attractive candidate for other companies to license. So what we'll do is we'll have a company that'll approach us. In the case of palliative care, there's other companies that specialize in different indications. So we have a licensing agreement with a company called Science. They're specializing in palliative care. They've licensed our psilocybin botanical drug for the treatment of palliative care. And they pay us milestone royalties and different early stage revenue as well as late stage royalties. So when we're talking about commercial partnerships. We're typically talking about licensing drug candidates. But in places like Oregon, where essentially, although it has to be bought and consumed at a service center, it's almost kind of like legal retail psilocybin. So in that case, what we do is we identify local Oregon companies who similarly want to in-license our technology in order to make our products, or at least products made with our technology, and distribute them in Oregon. Eventually, hopefully one day we have a legal recreational Canadian market.
Sure.
At that point, it would be the same thing. It would be making products for the eventual Canadian market.
So just to be clear, when you say commercial potential partnerships, we're talking about actual treatment centers first.
Manufacturers and treatment centers, and then also other drugs like pharmaceutical products.
Got it. Okay, so I've got one final question for you, Ben.
Sure.
And this is more personal. What brings you the most fulfillment out of being the CEO of Filament Health?
Definitely working with a team that we've already sort of been through all the battles before, and having that kind of tight-knit collaborative spirit that we built up over many years. Getting to have the experience of working with them again in an industry that's much more exciting and has the ability to do a lot of good for humanity. That's definitely what brings the most joy. Probably the most fulfilling aspect that's come on recently has been supplying patients through the Special Access Program. So we hear a lot of the different stories. We hear the patient reports. We hear, the other day I had one of the doctors that we've been supplying, he phoned up and he said, Ben, we had a wonderful experience last night with a palliative cancer patient. She had a psilocybin experience. Her husband was there. Her doctor, everyone was there. Everyone in the room was crying. Many breakthroughs were made, and we've given her, a much, much better, several more months of life left to live. Not only has it improved the quality of life for her substantially, but also for her families and for her family and all her loved ones. They don't have to go through as much pain seeing their loved one unfortunately deal with a terminal cancer diagnosis. So that, to have a company like ours that was started about 3 years ago, and a drug company that's already essentially able to distribute drugs to people that are in desperate need, I could never have predicted that things would happen that fast, right? The psychedelics industry is kind of going through a downward trend right now, at least like public valuations and stuff like that. But what we're seeing is actually an acceleration on the ground much quicker than we expected. I mean, we had Australia rescheduling psilocybin just the other day. We have Special Access Program patients that are, sometimes we get 5 or 10 approvals a week. Things are moving quickly, and legitimate medical professionals are on board, and it's going to come. And I think the snowball's going to keep going, and I really think that the downward pressure on valuations on the market is probably more largely to do with macro forces than with anything that's happening internally in psychedelics, and of course the backlash against the over exuberance and overabundance of hype that we had, during COVID,
back in 2020,
during the gravy train, when any BS deck and a half-baked scheme could raise $100 million.
Yeah, those days are over. But it's so inspiring to hear what you just said about being on the front lines and being in the grassroots of this movement and seeing that groundswell actually happening, because the consumer demand is there. The treatment, we do need it. And I'm so happy to hear that the Special Access Program is moving as fast as it is. I had some doubts about it actually, as to whether there would be this huge backlog, a real long waiting process, but you're telling me that up to 70 approved per month or something like this. This is
it's 70. We've had about 70 to 80 approvals. I think up to 100 doses in total. So, but since they really only started giving out approvals like at the end of last spring, right? But now the snowball, like once you take the genie out of the bottle, you can't put it back in, right? So the more people hear about it, if you apply for one of the indications that they've kind of given their blessing to, which is end of life distress as well as major depressive disorder, if you put together a complete application, which means mostly that you and your physician have tried, all the available treatments, or you justify why the available treatments aren't right for you, Health Canada will approve it, and we will give you the drug, and you will be able to experience it. So, it's there, right? It's there.
This is exciting, folks. So those who have treatment resistant depression, talk to your doctor. Maybe SSRIs are not right for you. Maybe there's something else out there that can really help you. Very exciting. Benjamin, thank you for your time today. It's been so great chatting with you. I hope to chat again soon.
You're very welcome. It would be a pleasure.
All right. Take care.